This is how the manhunt for Luis Francisco Soriano finally ended. On February of 2024, 2 people were found murdered inside their home in Broome County, New York. Their names were 73-year-old Catherine and her son, 48-year-old Christopher Ambrose. They were found by Catherine's daughter, who had come over to visit, but was instead greeted by a horrific scene. Their throats had been slit, they were stabbed multiple times, and Christopher's head had been smashed in with a frying pan. The house had also been set on fire in an effort to cover up the crime. It was clear that this was no accident. These were not random victims. This was personal. The motive would soon become apparent. In the days following the double murder, investigators released composite sketches of a man they called a person of interest. That person of interest was a handyman named Luis Francisco Soriano. He had worked at the Ambrose residence doing odd jobs, and was known to both Catherine and her son. He even helped them out in the hours leading up to the murders. When he gave Catherine a ride to a doctor's appointment, and later helped Christopher with car trouble. But he would have likely done these favors under duress, because by the next day, Luis was on the run. It only took police a couple of days to link him to the crimes. During a traffic stop in Connecticut, police found a pair of his boots, which matched footprints found at the crime scene. They also found surveillance footage that placed him at a convenience store near the Ambroses' home, right around the time of the murders. By all accounts, Luis had fled the state. There was a warrant out for his arrest, and he was wanted for 2 counts of second-degree murder. It was February 16, 2024. When authorities announced to the public that Luis was considered armed and dangerous. He had ties to several states and may have even crossed into Canada. Police believed he was driving a red pickup truck and warned the public not to approach him if they saw him, but to call 911 immediately. For nearly a year, Luis remained at large, and the town of Union was on edge. Now let me get caught up on a few things. First, Luis has not been convicted of anything, and all these are just allegations. Secondly, I am not going to speculate on his motives or mental state. All we know is what's been made public, and most of it is pretty damning against him. Lastly, I want to mention that this case will likely take some time to fully flesh out. So if you have tips or information, please reach out to the proper channels. The last confirmed sighting of Luis was on February 17, 2024, just 1 day after the murders. His abandoned pickup truck was found off the side of a highway near Scranton, Pennsylvania, about a 3-hour drive south of the crime scene. To make matters worse, police did not release this information to the public until 2 weeks later on March. This led to some resentment from nearby residents who felt they could have prevented the tragedy if they knew about the suspect earlier. If there was any doubt about where Luis was hiding, that doubt would be removed. On June 17, 2024, an anonymous hunter came across a tent in the woods in the same area where Luis's truck had been found. Inside the tent was a man matching his description. The hunter quickly called authorities, but when officers arrived at the scene, Luis was gone. He had apparently fled once again. By now, the FBI was involved, and a reward was offered for any information leading to Luis's capture. Surveillance footage from the area showed him wearing a backpack and walking eastbound on the shoulder of the highway. At this point, it seemed as though he was a ghost, able to go undetected for months at a time, always staying just one step ahead. But this would not last forever. On July 24, 2024, almost 5 months since the murders, police received a tip that Luis was spotted in a rural part of the town of Fenton, New York, less than 30 miles away from the original crime scene. When officers arrived at the home where he was believed to be staying, they noticed tire tracks and other evidence that suggested he was recently there, but he was nowhere to be found. Police searched the area for several hours and eventually found a camper matching the description of one owned by a friend of Luis. He had used this camper to move around while he was on the run, but they didn't find Luis here either. As the sun began to set, officers decided to set up a perimeter around the property and wait. They figured he would likely try to return to the camper during the night, and that's exactly what happened. At about 9:30 p.m., Luis drove up in a blue pickup truck and tried to open the camper. When he realized the cops were waiting for him, he ran into the woods again. A massive manhunt ensued. Helicopters buzzed overhead, dogs sniffed around the ground, and dozens of officers poured through the thick brush. Luis was finally being cornered. He was exhausted, hungry, thirsty, and desperate. After hours of searching, they tracked him down to a small cabin on state land. He had barricaded himself inside and refused to come out. The exact details of what happened next are unclear, but at some point, Luis surrendered peacefully and was taken into custody. He was brought back to Broome County to face the 2 murder charges. According to officials, there were no injuries during his arrest, but that doesn't mean the same for the families involved. The danger he posed became clear when, according to the Associated Press, the judge presiding over his arraignment was forced to pause the proceedings after a woman in the courtroom shouted, quote, "You deserve to die." Clearly, the community is still raw from the brutal killings, and many are seeking justice. Luis is currently being held without bail at the Broome County Jail and is scheduled to appear in court next month. This is where the legal process will begin and could potentially drag on for years. Even if he is found guilty, there are appeals and other motions that can prolong his imprisonment. With that said, I don't believe there is a death penalty in New York, so the worst he can receive is life in prison. Some have praised the police for their hard work in bringing Luis to justice. After nearly a year of fearing the worst, they finally have the man they've been looking for. Others have criticized them for not keeping the public informed. They announced Luis was a suspect earlier. People could have kept a closer eye out, and perhaps he wouldn't have been able to roam free for so long. Still, others are angry that he was able to slip through their fingers twice in Pennsylvania and once more here in New York. Some are asking why the police didn't shoot him when they had the chance. But it's important to remember that they probably didn't want to risk injuring him or anyone else. They needed him alive to stand trial. Plus, there was a good chance that he would have dropped the weapon if they had given him a clear warning. On a positive note, Luis's arrest has allowed many in the community to breathe a sigh of relief. They can now move forward with their lives knowing that the man responsible is behind bars. In a statement, District Attorney Michael Corman said, quote, "Today's apprehension of the defendant brings closure to a tremendously difficult chapter for the family and friends of the victims. As for the families themselves, they've chosen to keep a low profile, which is understandable. They've suffered a tremendous loss and deserve privacy during this difficult time. Through a lawyer, they did release a statement thanking everyone for their support and love and promise to honor the memory of their loved ones by continuing to be kind, compassionate, and helpful to others." If you're wondering what happens next, well, that's still to be determined. We also have to wait until the trial to hear all the evidence and decide whether or not Luis is actually guilty. So what do you think? Do you think justice was served? Is it worth it to wait nearly a year for his arrest? Or should the public have been informed sooner? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And that's it for now. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and stay tuned for more content. Thanks for watching.